Good to go.
Good to go?
Good to go.
All right, everybody, welcome back, or as our guest likes to say on his own podcast, welcome to SANDCAST Beach Volleyball with Bourne and Travis Mewhirter, and we're going a little different today. It's not a player or a coach, and I'd hate to limit the description of you to be a sports psychologist, but you're probably just a high-performance psychologist and one of the leading voices on just psychology and mental health in the U.S. right now, I think. So honored to welcome Michael Gervais on the podcast.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you for the intro.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy to have you on here because I feel like you're probably the guy that we've quoted the most on this show. We just naturally have listened to your podcast so much that we're like, oh, you know what we heard on Gervais podcast was blah. So
that's
our
cool.
guests probably already know who you are.
You say this to everybody, don't you? You butter them up, pump their tires. You're going to take it out soon. The air's coming out soon. So no problem.
Yeah, we're just warming you up.
Yeah, good. All right, cool.
I remember my first event this year was in Doha, Qatar in February, and we had a lot of adversity leading up to it, and I was on the flight. It's like a 14-hour flight, and just confidence was not at an all-time high. So I just binged a couple Finding Mastery podcasts, and just hearing other athletes have confidence struggles or just a little problems here and there. I was like, okay, other people have this problem, and then you kind of walked them through it, and it was great because me and Tri were actually talking about this, when you have other athletes on, it's almost like you're kind of breaking them down and building them up. And when you're in a situation where you can empathize with another athlete, it's like, he's almost talking to me. So I got to Doha, I was like, I feel so much better.
Oh, that's good.
So
that's actually a hope, is that we'll have conversations with people that are switched on and they've been in the arena is an important kind of gate for us. And then my hope is that people that are listening are answering the questions that the guest is wrestling with.
Yeah.
And some of those questions are new for them, and some are very familiar, the way that they work through them. So that's always the hope, is that people will listen to it and say, pause. How would I answer that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's the best. I think it's the best way to listen to it. And then the second best is when a question is interesting to you, you listen to how they respond to it, and these are all world's best, and then you scaffold or map that onto how you would answer it, if you already know it.
Yep.
And then there's this calibration I think I could upgrade, or actually that feels great, or that's flat out wrong for me. That would never work for me.
Right.
Somewhere in there, and then there's a calibration mechanism. And for me, that's really what psychology is about, because it's invisible. Is how do you organize your inner life? How do you use your thinking patterns and your individual thoughts to create the ability for you to be fully present, so that you can adjust to the unfolding, unpredictable, unknown moment?
Yeah.
And if you can do that inner work, then life ends up getting, I don't think it's easy by any means, but it gets a little easier because you're not whipped around.
Yeah.
You're able to be in the present moment more often.
And I feel like you're not feeling the need to look forward to the next moment and worry about, I got to be prepared for this next moment. You're like, no, I'm good, because I know when I get there, I'm just going to stay here.
That's
right.
Say that again. That's good.
I know when I get there, I'm just going to stay here.
Yeah, that's so good, right? Which in more, I don't know, less esoteric words is when I get there, I'll be there too.
Right. Yeah.
I'm staying grounded in who I am. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was something I know we've already talked about a lot, but when I was out, I had autoimmune disease. I was out for 2 years, and I was doing a ton of self-work. And I listened to your stuff a lot, along with a lot of other people, and I found that the deeper I got into it, I was like, wow, this is like a secret weapon I'm gaining here. I'm if I can bring all this back to sport, back to what I do, I'm going to be better. I legitimately was I'm going to be better than everybody else. This is the best thing. I kind of flipped it in my head, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me, because I've bought in so hard to the mental side of things and just went for it. And then I was like, holy crap, this is the real deal. This is what's going to help me get to the next level and do all this other stuff, which now in hindsight, how long have we been doing this podcast?
4 years, as of
4 years later.
Next Wednesday. Well, when this episode comes out, it'll actually mark the 4-year anniversary.
You guys have been in it. Yeah.
If I didn't get sick, I wouldn't have started the podcast. So it's been 4 years.
Yeah.
And now I went to the Olympics and won Manhattan. And it's kind of crazy to look back on and be like, if I didn't have that time where I actually bought into the mental, I don't think I would have been able to pull off what I did these 4 years later.
You know what's crazy is that when you're at your level of sport, I haven't met a coach or an athlete that doesn't nod their head up and down to the importance of the mental part of the game.
Yeah.
Right? Like you guys, I'm assuming, I don't want to lead you down a path, but I know your answer is like, yeah, it's important. Mm-hmm. You would probably say the same, like the mental part.
Very.
And then you double click, like, okay, what are you doing for that? Mm-hmm. You're like, you know, or like you ask a coach, like, okay, well, how much of your time of your practice is dedicated to mental training? And they're like, you know, so, and that, I don't befault the coaches or the athletes. It's really the science going from the laboratory into application that stitch hasn't been eloquently made yet.
Yeah.
And it's because the science of excellence is relatively new as a science.
Right.
And right now is a really exciting time because we are much closer to knowing best practices in a laboratory and best practices, you know, on the playing field.
Yeah.
And so those are becoming more apparent. And it's one of the reasons we're seeing progression in sport happen at a faster clip as well. One of many.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, so it's pretty exciting times.
And this, I mean, like you mentioned, it's all relatively new. And I don't want to call it a fad, but I feel like mental health or mindset training, imagery, visualization, you know, it's kind of, that's what everybody's talking about right now. When you were studying at LMU and you got your master's or PhD at San Diego, did you imagine how, like, what a steep climb it would take to where we are now? And now it's almost, if you're in the Olympics, like, you almost have to be on top of your mental game.
You've been at it for how long, you know, before it's cotton on?
Me personally. So I graduated, I was practicing with a master's degree in, let's see, I think it was like 96.
Okay.
And so I think that's about right, somewhere in that range. I got to go do my math. And then it always felt like, so I grew up surfing, it always felt like the swell was coming. And I could, you know, do you guys surf at all?
Oh, yeah.
He's a big surfer.
Yeah, so you know when you can tell there's a rhythm to the ocean and you're like, okay, I think a set's coming.
Yeah.
And then you can also do the same thing with like a swell. You can see some forecasting, you know, some systems and go, swell's coming. So I could feel the swell coming, but it felt like there was lots of selling that I was having to do. Not like a salesman, like a car salesman, but like, okay, this is important. You know, this is important, right? Yeah, this is important. And then getting people to actually, coaches in this case, create the space for the work to happen, it was hard. And then I left pro sport because of this reason, is that they say, yeah. And then it was like, well, I don't have time, and, you know, this is kind of too hard, and, you know, I've got to do this, that, and the other on the physical or technical, and it became an extra. And listen, in my life, I don't want to be an extra, right? You know, I don't want that. So I left pro sport saying, and this is the big ones, you know, the hockey, football, basketball. And I left pro sport to go into environments of consequence where they weren't screwing around. You know, they're like, listen, my life depends on it. My partner's life depends on me having full command of myself in high stress, fast paced, exact environments.
Like military or still sport?
Still sport. So it's adventure based stuff.
Yeah.
You know, high stakes backcountry stuff.
I remember, what was it? Stratosphere
Red Bull
jump?
Stratos was one of those, like, wasn't that cool? Yeah. Felix Baumgartner. It was just the anniversary.
10 years or something?
No, how many years ago was it?
2014?
9 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, 9 years ago. And it was just a couple days ago, it was the anniversary, where he literally jumped out of a capsule that the team built at 128,000 feet. Like, so imagine 130,000 feet. You see the curvature of the earth. There's a moment in time when he had to kind of climb out to the ledge. And when he climbed out to the ledge, his feet were bigger than the platform. And he's in a full spacesuit, and he's looking down. And at that moment, if he were to go into a flat spin, so if he jumps and he's off axis just a little bit, his shoulders tilt just a little bit, and if you were to go into a flat spin for more than 5 seconds, potentially all the blood could rush to his head or his feet and or his feet, and he would land because gravity works.
Yeah,
you know, but he would land without any faculty. And there was some thought that that could be permanent. So imagine being on this platform, seeing the curvature of the earth, and having such command and such commitment that you purposely put yourself in that situation and then you execute against it.
Right.
Now, I would make the analogy that that is in a less dramatic fashion, but not less important fashion. Every moment of our life is that moment. And so if you don't fully commit to being in this present moment, you lose it. You don't get it. You get some fraction of it. And so if you add that up over time, our life begins to not become even close to what we potentially could experience in life.
Right.
And so for most of us, we don't have the ability, the faculty, to have true command of ourselves. And so we end up not living or being in the present moment because our mind is running amok and our brain is running amok trying to survive. And so that project for me materially changed my life, and it became crystal clear how important it is for others to spend more time in the present moment. Matter of fact, it's come to be that's my life purpose, is to help people live in the present moment more often.
I love that.
Is there any, because I completely agree with it. Then when I apply it to myself, I'm like, is there any moments, like what if I just was present every single moment? Would that work? Because like, I got to look forward sometimes, right? And then I got to look back sometimes to reflect on what I've done to change how I'm acting in this moment, right? Or is that something that you just don't have, like if I were to literally be present at all times, would that work? Or I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
That's really cool. Okay, so if we deconstruct this just a bit,
okay.
If you're in the present moment and you have control, you have awareness, is really what I'm talking about, and you have awareness that I'm going to think about the future. And then when you've solved that or have a plan for that, or you've done your imagery for that, or whatever it might be, then you also have, with great awareness, the ability to come back to the present and entertain the present moment. So it's not like thinking back and thinking forward are problematic. It's just that if it's left in an undisciplined way, then what ends up taking place is that we don't have the control to be here when we want to be here. And so remember, our brain is designed to solve a problem, and that is survival. So the brain has got this beautiful, complicated ecosystem that it's trying to solve survival. So when it scans the world and is taking in information through our senses, it's for one dictum: survive. Now, if left unchecked, that's all we're doing is trying to survive. So what we want to be able to do is use our mind, which is, in an overused analogy, the mind is the software that's running the hardware. It doesn't quite hold up, but it's maybe an easy example to think through. That we can train our mind, we can develop our software to work to get the most out of our brain. And so when we get those two things to work in harmony, then we find that we are actually in control of our life rather than being whipped around by the demands of the external world.
Right.
And that's what happens to many athletes, is that they show up on center court, or they show up, they cross the first line, the first tape to get into the game, and all of a sudden, because the external conditions feel a certain way, that now they are different.
Right.
And that that's somebody who hasn't done their work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember in college, before I knew your name, Pete Carroll was at SC when I was there, and we were going to the national championship, or the Final Four, and my coach called Pete in just to talk to the team,
Who's your coach at the time?
Bill Ferguson.
Oh, Bill.
You know?
Bill.
Yeah.
Oh, what's up,
Oh, yeah,
Bill?
you spoke to the team a few years later, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's how I first heard about you.
Okay.
I was like a year out.
It didn't go very well.
Did it not?
No,
The one player who told me about it said it was like awesome. Like, this Gervais guy, like he told us about, getting this guy to jump out of. No, that's not exactly, but he was talking about the stratosphere thing.
No, we did a plane. It was at that time. He might have been talking about when I helped another athlete, Luke Akins, jump from a plane at 30,000 feet into a 16-story net that he built and his friends.
Oh, I remember that too.
And he did it without a parachute.
Of course, I feel like I see all these crazy athletic achievements, and then I find out later, Gervais was behind that.
Those are pretty intense, man. But think about that one. jumping from 30,000 feet, which is where you travel when
Yeah.
you're traveling anywhere on an airliner.
Jeez.
And then if you were to, next time you're up there, look down.
With no parachute.
No parachute.
Oh God.
And when you look down, your target is the size of a stamp. So literally that's what he had to hit. And a 16-story net that he built was about the size of a 4-car garage. So imagine
That's
you're
not big.
No, that's not very big. So you're looking down, it looks like a stamp. You've got to navigate your way to get to that.
Jeez.
And then it's full commitment. There's no safety, literally, other than the thing you have to hit. And so we need them in our life, by the way. People often think that they're crazy.
Yeah.
They're not. They are true explorers of potential of humans. And we need them to remind us of what it means to get up on the edge.
Right.
And they look at us, by the way, sitting in, closed spaces and the life that we live, and they're like, what are you guys doing with
guys
your
are
life?
crazy.
Yeah, like you guys are crazy. It's all they got it all upside down.
Totally.
Yeah. So
I remember when you were on Tim Ferriss's podcast, he asked if you could create a course. What would it be? Do you remember? It was a while ago. Do you remember what you said?
I actually don't.
You said that you didn't have a specific name for it, but you were just like, whatever it is, it would be dangerous.
Yeah.
Because we don't have enough of that in our lives anymore. And I think you're absolutely right. We grew up in these like really safe environments, and then whenever we're presented with a hard thing, it's like, oh gosh, a lot of us kind of freak out right now.
Yeah, I do remember that part of the conversation, actually. And I think the living laboratory that we all have has danger in it. And understanding how to work with that danger, whether it's real or perceived, is fundamental. And most of the time we're perceiving danger that is actually not a material threat to us. And so understanding, again, back to like how our brain works and how we can use our mind to work with our brain well, most of the things when we scan the world are not real threats.
Right.
They're threats of what our identity might be if people don't like us.
Right.
Those are most of the threats.
Yeah, it's wild. Do you think that, like, the state that our body goes into when we perceive fear puts us in a better...
Perceived danger or threat.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
fear is the emotional response to it.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Does that put us in a better state to perform, like, chemically and
Yeah, that's a
whatnot?
cool question. So let's use this is an antiquated model, but it still holds up for a good example. There's a Yerkes Dodson that designed this inverted U hypothesis. So think about just a normal distribution curve. So on the bottom you've got 0 to 10, and then on the vertical axis you've got low performance to high performance.
Okay.
So if you imagine that relationship, a 10 is like I've got too much internal activation, and that maps to low performance.
Okay.
And a 1, 2, 3, 4 would be low activation, and that also would map to low performance. But you got this sweet spot on that scale of activation, 4, 5, and 6.
Right.
Where if you think about the big hump in the curve, the distribution, the upside down U, that's where high performance is experienced. So to answer your question concretely, you need that switched on ability, you need some activation, but too much becomes problematic. So you need a little bit of kind of hand, shake, if you will. Too much is a problem, but not enough where you're yawning because
Right.
you're bored is a
Yeah.
problem. So it's that, I don't know another word for it other than like switched on, like when you're really switched on.
That's so interesting. Okay, so what comes to mind here? I had a final. It was probably my third final, AVP final I was playing in against Jake and Casey. I was with Hayden back in the day.
Casey.
Patterson.
Yeah.
And then, so I was amped up, but I got to this, I don't even know where. I'm playing with mental things that work all the time. But
Like what? Before you get to the story, like what? What are the mental things?
Well, I just feel like I'm always, every day is like, okay, I know what worked yesterday. Let's try it again today.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this isn't working. What else can I try to
Like
do
what
to
are
get
the
myself to a place where I'm playing well?
Okay, so it's like thoughts or movements to try to find that.
It's
pocket?
usually thoughts or like focusing on something like, at the Olympics, it was like grab the sand or touch the sand, feel it in between my fingers. And then, but if I'm not playing well, I'll let go of that and be like, that's not working. How about, what this used to work? A mantra, observe behavior without judgment. Oh, it's not working. Until I find something and I get a good point or whatever, I'm like, okay, stick with it. Okay, now I'm in the space.
Got it.
And then I'll just stay there. I feel like that's how it is just at all times,
To me, when I hear that, I go, oh, you're working. Like, cool. And then I go, I think that's exhausting. And maybe it's working for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. I don't know. I'm open. But, here's what I was getting at is that it's kind of going back to the fear thing. In that final, I tried something in my head where I felt like I wanted to be in a state, the best state possible. And the state that I came up with was trying to get that feeling that I get when I'm paddling for a wave that I know is a little big and I'm kind of scared, but I've committed.
That's it.
You know that feeling? Where I'm like, I'm scared, but I'm already going. So there's no point in, let's just be here. There's no point in going back because if I pull off, I'm going to go over the falls and it's going to be worse. So let's just be here and go forward. And that's the state that I was literally blocking better than I ever have, 5 blocks. And I'm like, this is a great spot for me right now. But I just thought that was fascinating, mentally how I was literally between every point. I was like, okay, big waves coming. I'm paddling. Yep. Okay.
So you were looking,
and then I opened my eyes and I was blocked.
So what you were doing was looking for a feeling.
Yes.
Right? And which is what thoughts do, is they create emotional experiences for us. Okay, so you're using your thoughts to create an emotional experience, which, pause that for a moment, because when you understand the mechanism of how thoughts work and how emotions work, then it's not the thing, whether it's the sand or a mantra or whatever, it's not the thing, it's the fact that you are looking for a particular feeling, and all of the things that you just described are mechanical to take your mind off of something that is creating too much tension, right? So if you're going to feel the sand between your fingers, it's a forcing function to be present.
Right, yeah.
And to be present with something that is hopefully going to take you out of an anxious state.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you don't really need to feel the sand between your hands or fingers if you're already fully present.
Right, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Like if you're in a space where you're leaning forward and you love the challenge ahead and you have this internal belief system that I have what it takes to meet this challenge. That's a big deal, right? So when your psychological framework looks to the challenge and goes, I have what it takes to meet this. And guess what? If it doesn't work out, I'm fine anyway.
Right.
So there's 2 parts to it. It's called, here's a technical term, it's an appraisal. So our mind is constantly appraising our internal capabilities matched up with the perceived demand of the environment. So if you look at your competitors and you're like, no chance, I don't have what it takes.
Yeah.
Or I'll be lucky to get a point off him. Or that guy's, he's all this, all that. He's stat leader, this, there, and the other. And man, I kind of feel out of place out here. So now you're going to put yourself in a state of anxiety or doubt. Then I would definitely grab some sand and be like, if I can feel the crystals falling, between my hands.
Yeah, it's like grabbing your tool. You're
That's exactly it.
This is broken. Let me get my this.
Yeah, right.
And then, it's not working. Let me try this thing.
But the mechanism is to pull your mind into the present moment and into something that is actually non-consequential. Yeah. So it's a resetting mechanism. Yeah. And then, but there's lots of ways to do that, right? Sand is one. Yeah. So you don't have to what's the one? There's lots of ways. And guess what? The sand will always work, but you have to fully commit to it. There's an old meditation practice where you do your breathing to down-regulate and to be more present, and then you look to just feel relentlessly, if you will, the ridges of your fingertips. And you just stay across the ridges of your fingertips. And there's a deep focus that comes with it, and there's a calming nature that will happen there. Now, this is not going to lead to insight, but this is a nice, awareness training, and a refocus training.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I'm really curious. You left pro sports to go work with guys who were jumping out of spaceships and airplanes.
Yeah.
Does your approach differ at all in how you work with someone? Because try playing in a final is obviously a very intense, big moment for him. But whether he wins or loses, he's going to come back home to Gabby and Naya. You know, he isn't at risk of, you know, tilting 5 degrees and losing all the blood in his brain. So do you approach a volleyball player going to the Olympics any different than you would approach like an Alex Honnold free soloing El Cap?
It's a really important question, and there's a piece in here that I think is worth exploring, and this is philosophical. And I wouldn't begin to suggest that one is right or the other, but I'm happy to share my approach in it. And it's, is there big moments? And so most people that listen to ESPN and, you know, sports franchise or sports media would say, oh yeah, there's big moments, because that's what they say. Defining moment. This is a career, you know, game-changing moment. This is the biggest game they've ever played, and that is a popular narrative, and I can understand the argument there. I have a different approach to life, which is that no moment is bigger than another, and each moment has its own unique consequences. And if I don't live in this moment, the consequence is that I'm not alive. Well, that's actually quite significant to me. I want to be fully alive.
Yeah.
And I want to prepare myself to be fully alive in the moments that are really important, which, and I put quotes around important, because, again, first principle is that every moment is important. But for most people, what is the important moments? Like walking into your home and greeting your loved ones, you know, walking on the court and being animated in the best version of yourself. Fill in the blanks. And those are what most people call big moments. But if you don't practice being fully present in the other moments, you will not be ready for whatever that quote-unquote big moment is. So long way of me saying is that I hear the question, and the first thing that I do is I'm not teaching somebody about the value of moments. I want to understand their philosophy. And if they say, listen, Gervais, this is the fucking biggest moment of my life. Okay, so then how are we going to prepare for it? You know, and it's going to be a set of the same practices, which is like how, if you're anticipating this moment to be big, then how do you want to organize your life so that you are ready for that moment when it does happen? And then for me, it's like this beautiful philosophical question, like, really does this matter that we're living in now, that the stakes are low for us right now? Does it matter?
Right.
You know, does this moment matter? And if it doesn't really matter, then be casual. Don't be about it. But if it does matter to you, be engaged. Bring your very best here.
Yeah.
And this is the preparation for a later moment where is physically consequential or potentially emotionally consequential.
Right.
Yeah. So the short answer, it's all the same.
Right.
Yeah, the short answer is all the same.
And your mission, as you say, is kind of to get everyone to work on being more present.
That's right.
And we hear that a lot. It's kind of, you know, the 2021 catchphrase, but we're also in what I think is maybe the most distractible society we've ever been in. And so it's this dichotomy where we got a lot of people talking about, let's be present, and Instagram, you know, and we can't, if you go to a restaurant, you just look at every table, you got 4 phones on the table. You know, everyone's so distracted all the time. So how do we start bringing it back to a more present society? What steps do we take?
Well, we have to understand how understand how we're working, how our brain and our minds work. And we are in a culture, to your point, that attention has always been one of our greatest that's what I'm looking at, economies. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, attention has always been one of our greatest currencies. Now we have this very sophisticated mechanism that sits in our hand most of the day that pulls our attention to it. And so that is new, but attention as a skill and a currency is not new. And so we understand that the deepest experiences in life are when we are fully present. So now we've got this thing that sits in our hand, in our pockets, that's pulling our attention. Even more complicated, it is providing small hits of cocaine. So dopamine is what cocaine does in the system is floods our brain with dopamine. And so what these devices do that have novel, stimulating, interesting information at a thumb click is like a small hit of cocaine. So literally we've hooked ourselves up, and our brains are tapped right into these small hits of dopamine, small hits of cocaine. And it's not by accident. I mean, the social media tech companies that we're thinking in our minds right now have hundreds and thousands of PhD psychologists that know exactly how the brain works. And they've created their entire product around it. So that's a long, scary narrative to say, right now you need some discipline now. You really need some discipline in your life. And if you don't have that discipline to put down the thing that's going to tripwire dopamine, a la little hits of cocaine, then we need to front load our training. And in sport, you guys know it. We front load all our training. We front load in practice, technical training, physical training, and now mental training. So this is just another jumping off point to say, yeah, let's train our mind, right? So that you can deal with distractions better. And by the way, mindfulness and meditation is having a moment. And, well, it's been having moments for 2,600 years, actually. But so it's having a moment now, and that is the practice of increasing awareness and refocusing. It's those two things that are at the core of that practice.
Yeah.
Why refocusing is so important? To come back to the present moment, because that is where the truth of all things are experienced. And so I don't know that it's that complicated. It just feels like people are more aware of it right now, and people are more stressed than I've ever experienced in my lifetime. I don't know what it was like to live in the dark ages.
Right.
I don't think that was very
stressful.
This sounds a little, so, people say the most stressful time in humanity. I don't know. I don't kind of think so. But there is modern stressors that are exhausting, and people are exhausted right now.
Yeah.
And so dealing with those distractions is materially important for the quality of one's life.
We've mentioned mental training a couple times. Obviously, physical training is nothing new. You go to the weight room. We have all these different exercises. I feel like mental training, a lot of people hear it, and it's a little more vague.
Yeah.
What does mental training look like to you, or just some good practices that either athletes or just normal folk can get into to either like de-stress a little bit or not need the hit the dopamine cocaine on our phones?
Yeah, I know. It feels good though, doesn't it? Where has this 20 minutes gone in my life? What have I done to myself?
Like, I've been aware enough to catch myself on the phone, but these reels just came out where they're just so interesting.
And you're interested in reels, aren't you? Right? Yeah.
Damn it, that's so good.
Okay, next one I'm gonna put it away.
This next one can't be as good as the last. Damn, that's good.
And those are those little dopamine hits.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just doing coke all day.
Essentially, yeah. You didn't even know.
Thought I hadn't tried it. Wow. Okay.
So the what was the question?
I forget.
I forgot to.
What does mental training?
Oh, what does it look like? Okay, so speed, agility, quickness, power, strength are kind of words that we throw around all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the psychological space, it would be self-discovery, and I'll explain. I can double click on all these for you. Mm-hmm. Self-discovery, mindfulness, mental skills, psychological framework, and recovery practices. So those are the way that we think about training your inner life. So self-discovery is about who are you and answering the big questions in life. And from that emerges a worldview and a philosophy of who you are and a value set of what matters most, so that you can have those pillars in place to be able to have a backstop of how to think, how to use your mind for thoughts and words and how to behave in alignment with what matters most to you. Because somebody who's feeling stress, our brain does this thing, fight, flight, freeze, and submit. Our brain does this thing where it narrows our options. So in that moment, it's very hard, unless you've got great clarity about how do I want to think? How do I want to use my words, and how do I want to respond? Mm-hmm. And so if you've got those virtues in place, if you've got your core pillars, about who am I, what is possible in my life, what does success look like, then you've got a backstop. And then, so that's what the self-discovery thing is about. It's asking and answering the hard questions in life, and so that's the self-discovery bit. And then on the mental skills, there's only a handful of mental skills. being calm is a mental skill. You can practice it.
Yeah.
You can practice down regulating. And if you don't practice it, you cross the volleyball tape line and all of a sudden your heart is thumping, like you're late.
Right. Yeah.
Like, what are you doing with your life? Really, you train 30 to 40 hours a week physically and technically, and you're not going to train your mind to be right? That seems antiquated.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's a waste of time.
Yeah.
Right? And so training calm, there's lots of ways to do it. We can talk about those, but breathing is an important strategy. And then purposely putting yourself in high stress environments and being aware that you're going to put yourself in that uncomfortable situation and downregulate when you're in it. So that's how you would train calm.
Yeah.
It's inoculation of stress. Confidence is a mental skill. So you can train it just like you train anything else. Being fully focused and present is a trainable skill.
Yeah.
And you can't enter flow state. You can't enter your best version of yourself without passing through the first gate of deep focus. So this is a problem for humanity. If our minds are wandering left unchecked, social media, this, that, and the other, but it's really an undisciplined parenting model and an undisciplined, schooling model that has not taught us really the mechanics of focus, but they've taught us that you have to focus to do school well or to whatever well. But you can actually train focus. That is part and parcel what meditation is. And then learning how to trust yourself is a skill. And so those are 4 mental skills that I think are really important. Imagery is amongst the top. And that too is a skill. You can practice it, you can get better at it. And according to science, it's a wildly powerful tool. Skill, I should say, not a tool. So,
Yeah.
So those are just a handful.
Yeah.
If you were, we're in the off season, right? Volleyball off season right now. A lot of players and teams like myself, everyone's trying to figure out what new teams. I'm not saying I'm going to be on a new team. I'm just saying it's a fresh time to put together.
Volleyball is like wild about how, like honestly, like
that's what
it's pretty hostile out there.
Exactly.
Like partner switching is like, man, allegiance and loyalty and like.
If
you can be the person that's like, listen, I'm going to commit to you as a partnership, but it's awesome. You can trust yourself and you can trust them to work through hard problems. But most people don't have that commitment. They're looking for the next best. As an opportunistic approach. And I think it's that structure that you guys have that you work through is revealing about human nature in many ways.
Totally.
It's also why divorce rate is better than 50%. People
Right.
don't really know what it means to commit.
Yeah,
and
Exactly.
so then that goes back to like self-discovery. Like, who are you? Are you, like really, who are you? And I have great respect for people in your field that speak honestly about the dilemma that they're in with their partner and just like come from that place.
Yeah.
So you work it out together. And I don't know. Anyways, I know that's not what you're talking about, but it's like I watch what you guys go through and the anxiety is really high.
Yeah.
And
it's a lot of like, just speaking for the athletes as a whole, because we have a lot of them, the young ones on the show, we have, and we go through kind of what people are going through. And we hear a lot that usually younger players are like jumping from partner to partner.
Yeah.
Oh, we're not, we weren't feeling it. Like a team will train the whole off season and then lose their first 2 events.
Yeah, right.
Which it's a tournament, so only one team can win.
Yeah, right.
And then they switch partners, and we're like, and for me at least, I was lucky enough to have a long-term partner in the beginning, and I just found the value in sticking with one partner. Granted, I was lucky.
Do you think that they switched high schools too, and their parents
Maybe.
moved them around, to find the best opportunity for playing?
What a
and
good question.
Switch coaches a bunch at club,
Yeah.
and like left their strength coaches but like I imagine this isn't their first go at hitting the panic button.
Right.
Huh.
I think that there's some pattern recognition in that's probably important.
Yeah.
So
That's the
I would not
psychologist.
I would not have thought about that.
Yeah.
Looking a little deeper. But yeah, we try to like, tell people, the younger players, like find the value in sticking with a team, because a lot of times that 2-loss stretch that you went on is the valuable key piece that's going to get you, like getting through that is what's going to add that next weapon for you guys to succeed. But a lot of people don't see that, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, it's
or
going
understand that that's like something that you need in the path to mastery, I guess, is like the dips are a necessary part of it.
Oh yeah, I mean so we've got helicopter parenting.
Oh yeah.
You're familiar with that?
Yes.
And then Zamboni parenting is what's taking place right now.
Zamboni parenting. This is a new term.
Is it? Yeah.
For me, I haven't heard it.
So Zamboni from like on hockey.
Grooming everything
Just
for
grooming
them?
the whole,
Okay.
just getting out in front, making it all
making
nice
life
and
too
smooth
easy.
ice,
Yeah.
you know. And so you and I, we come from places where there's a little bit of, you know, sand in our shorts or sand in our mouth and, you know, a little blood in our teeth and fear at the top and the bottom of a big wave. And so having that that soft underbelly is problematic to do hard things. And I'm not suggesting that people need to do hard things that are dangerous, but I don't know how you can do hard things in life if you don't practice doing hard things.
Yeah.
And so there's something that's very powerful about standing in a moment. Let's use a fist fight. I do not want to advocate violence. Like, that's not what I'm suggesting. But I didn't have the experience, the luxury of not having violence in my life. And so there's something incredibly valuable about sitting in a moment knowing that your life is being threatened by another person and there's nowhere to go. And so you have to drop into that moment with your hands and your feet and in the most ancient of ways, your head, and to be able to navigate that moment. And sometimes the most powerful thing to do is figure out how to not engage in physical violence. But if it's happening, there's something very powerful about that. And again, I do not want to advocate violence, but being able to stand in the presence of danger and do it with other people that say, I've got your back. Like, where else do you get it?
Right.
You know, there's a rite of passage that takes place in sport. That is part of the rite of passage of partnership in love and partnership on the court, which doesn't mean it's not love. But to have that partnership requires to go through difficult times so you can say, they got my back.
Yeah.
And in return, demonstrate that you have their back. All of that starts.
There's your lesson.
There's your lesson. All of that starts, though, you have to have your back. And so you are the pebble in the pond that creates ripples. And if you don't invest in your inner life, you don't know if you have your back.
You don't even know you.
Yeah,
really.
Exactly.
Until you look.
Yeah. And so what do you do when it's difficult? Do you do what your brain tells you to do, which is narrow all of your attention, turn inward, tighten up to either fight or run away? Or can you drop your shoulders when it's hard and explore and love the ability to explore the unfolding moment? If you can get to that place, that is part of mastery.
Yes. That's what we've been trying to say for 4 years.
You guys are great. Yeah.
Okay, so we're still in the off season. You're a beach volleyball player. I'm kind of like just working this towards my story a little. Now, you got to put together your own team. So coach, you can make your team as big as you want. There's no money problems.
Okay.
Like, what are the people that you surround yourself with, and are the factors that you think about first when creating your team? And your goal is to be an Olympian. You know, play at the highest level, whatever it is. For example, what are you looking for in your team? Like grit or leadership or like chemistry or stuff like that. Or even like, you know, I'm going with a mental coach first.
Yeah. Awesome.
Just like putting your whole team together.
The fact that you're answering the question is like, that's the coolest part of this.
I'm kind of in that space for myself.
This is cool. Okay, so
I'm not switching teams. I'm just doing self-work.
You're building your team.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I would start first with self-discovery. You know, to really examine the big questions in your life, and start with those things and write them down. It's as simple as writing a list down and you can start small. You can thin slice it. Like, what are 3 big questions, or what are 10 big questions? And then you don't even have to answer them, but come back around, you know, a following day or whatever, or later that night, and another 10, and then start to chip away with them. So I would do that self-discovery bit first, okay? And therein lies the biggest weight that you're going to throw into the pond. You are the big pebble in the pond, because you're going to create ripples rather than your environment around you rippling in. You're creating ripples around. So then you are making other people better to your standards.
Right.
Okay. And then if you have other people in your life that have done that work, So then it becomes really powerful. So the first is I would do that work.
Yeah.
And then I would only have people in my life that are also doing that work or wanted to do that work. So skill set, I'm not including yet. I'm starting with the value of going deep to understand like the big stuff so that you know they won't get rattled.
Yeah.
Because if you have a narrow view of life and this whole thing in sport is going to define, the outcome is going to define you, it's going to get too big for them. Right? So not letting the external define the internal, but the most powerful people that I know, their internal experience dictates the way they experience life. So the external doesn't dictate the internal influences the external.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I would be incredibly purposeful about my life partner. And I would start there at ground zero, so ground zero is really yourself and knowing yourself. And then the first layer out would be the most important relationship you have in your life, your intimate partner, if you're fortunate enough to have one. I would start there. So when people often would ask me like, Mike, are there secrets? I say, no. Are there any common threads? Maybe. One of the common threads is that nobody does the extraordinary alone. So we need others. And our most significant relationship is where it begins.
Right.
Then, outside of that, I would go to people that are really curious, they've been in the arena, or if they haven't been in the arena, they're incredibly humble and committed to understand the arena, okay? And I would definitely start with a head coach first. I would have on my...
For your teammate.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm assuming... Yeah, I'm
You
assuming
already
that...
have your teammate.
Yeah, I'm assuming you already have your teammate.
Oh, no, this is for you.
This is for me. Then, okay,
your team.
then my team. Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Then I would be open. I wouldn't go hunt. I would like almost have like, if you're going to rent an apartment or something, it's like roommate wanted.
Have coffee with people. See
Yeah.
where they're at.
Yeah, and so I would but I would know what I was looking for. And to your point earlier, I would write down some important qualities and characteristics, and then I would spend time to understand those. But the mechanics of the team is like partner and coach, of course. I would definitely have on my team a sports psychologist because obviously it's my whole career and my livelihood, and I think it's a beautiful science and necessary. And then, but my sports psychologist, strength coach, nutritional expert, it doesn't mean that they're going to have all equal time. Sports psych might be a handful of hours a week. Your strength coach is going to have much more time. Nutrition would be a thoughtful program. And I'd also have somebody that could help me with data management so that I'm not trying to crunch my own data. Yeah. If money was not an issue, I'd have a sports scientist on staff. I would have somebody that is taking my nutritional blood analyses and creating food for me. And so chefing up the food that is unique to my needs. And then I have a switched on kick-ass medical team that really understands preventative care and then also triage management. And I've had somebody that is of wisdom. It could be any one of those people, or it could be another partner. I want to make sure that wisdom was part of the program. So those are some of the beginnings of how I'd structure it.
Yes, I'm glad I recorded that. I'm just check off all the boxes for myself after this.
Try's team just doubled overnight.
Hey, I'm asking this selfishly, but all of you players out here, I know all the people we've had on, here's our answers. This is the stuff we're trying to figure out for ourselves. And no matter what level you're at, this is the homework you got to do.
And let's say that resources...
figure stuff out for yourself.
Yeah, and let's say that resources are an issue.
Which it is for a lot of beach volleyball players. Only the top,
It's usually
what
the
percent
biggest issue.
paid?
I mean, outside of basically if you're not on the USA stipend, which is what the top 6 teams, so 12 players on men's and women, then you're really just living off sponsorship and prize money, which is vanishingly low.
And if you're not on the national team, your sponsors aren't as good as the players on the national team.
So for the most part, resources are the biggest inhibitor of a really young, promising talent ever achieving that talent, because they just look at it and it's like, well, I can't lose $20,000 a year traveling the world for 2 or 3 years. I need to get a job
without working. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I definitely get the boogie here, and I think it's materially important that scrappiness is part of your team scrappiness. And so, you got to be scrappy, right? And so I'd pull people on the same side of the table that I'm on, which is limited resources. And I'd find those people that have a fire in their belly, like I was talking about earlier, that will do the hard things and wants to be on the team. And this is not about money. This is about doing something that is hard and as a team, and we're going to learn a lot. And, you know, I don't know how the compensation will work, but it's not about money. Mm-hmm. And there are plenty of hungry professionals in those sports science arenas that I just talked about that would love to work with you guys. Mm-hmm. And so, and there's some that are well established that are on the other side of their career that would love to work with you guys. So I think that you just find the people, you know, either early or late, because people that are in the thick of their career probably are like trying to build their career and their teams. Yeah. And, you know, maybe there's money involved there. I don't know. So
be scrappy.
Yeah. I think if there's one trait that beach volleyball players do have because of the limited resources, and Casey Patterson, when we had him on the podcast, he said, if I'm starting a business, I'm hiring almost exclusively from the beach volleyball talent pool because these people just work and they just find any way, learn a new skill set every night, fine. Like, I'll figure it out.
And there are people who have chosen to do this for the love of it. Like, no, I'm going to do this instead of going down that traditional path of, like, get a job, make sure you're, educated maybe, you know, or get a further education. They're beach volleyball players like, no, this sounds like my life. This is what I want to do, so I'm going to do it.
My first pro volleyball player I worked with was probably like 17, 18 years ago. And that was not the case. Back then, I would not have hired the community of volleyball players at that point. Literally, they were like smoking bowls between sets, you know, and that's probably still happening now. You know, like there's another part here that, like, let's not be too varnished, right? Like,
I'd say it's way different though, like, because I still hear stories.
It is. I think it is different.
You know, my coach's era, and it's like, not many people are playing stoned anymore.
It's becoming more professional for sure.
It has. It's matured in many ways, and it's why it's really fun to see. There's an entrepreneur spirit inside of beach volleyball. One of the things I love about beach volleyball is that from a fan's perspective, it's so intimate. You guys are right there's a porous nature right up against the fan experience, and it's super exciting that way for folks. And you don't walk around like you are let me tell you a story. I was at Nike headquarters, and an athlete was visiting, and this athlete will remain nameless at this point, has their people come forward and say, such and such is about to enter the building, go into your offices.
Oh, gosh.
Get out of here.
Wow.
You know, like, honestly. Like
the Queen of England?
Yeah. It's funny you say queen. But, you know, like, so it's like, it's really nauseating when people forget where they come from. And so it seems in many respects, beach volleyball has not been polluted by that. Now, there's some arrogant, there's some arrogance that floats around, and not to be naive about it. But so I love that entrepreneurial spirit that you guys have, and the porous nature between the fans, and it's really cool.
You mentioned that one of the biggest battles is not letting the external determine the internal.
That's right.
And how the internal should really be what's influencing the external. And you know, one of my favorite books that I reread this year was Andre Agassi's Open, and so I'm sure you've probably read that
so
one.
Good.
And he wrestles with that like all the time throughout that book. How to, like, if you're in a losing streak and you're just losing, it does weigh on you, even if you know, like, this isn't who I am. I'm not just a losing beach volleyball player, but it is a tough rut to get out of sometimes, as we've seen from pretty much every high performer. You know, from Michael Jordan to Andre Agassi, to really, I mean, April and Alex have probably wrestled with that a few times. And I'm wondering, how do you keep...
A few times.
I enjoyed your podcast with them.
They win a lot, don't they? Yeah, they win a lot. Yeah.
But how do we keep that balance right between the internal outweighing the external?
Well, that's the investment that you make. I think, you know, it's like engineering, you know, garbage in, garbage out. And so if you don't put great care and attention to your internal faculties, they will fall short. And the external is so loud that it will win. And so one way to think it through is, like, you can do your own experiment over the course of like a day or a week or something, And when you walk into particular environments, does the environment change you? And does it erode at your core virtues and your personal philosophy and the essence of who you are and who you want to be? And so you can do that experiment on yourself. And for the most part, like, most people struggle here. And it's only not because they're weak. I'm not ever going to use that. It's because they haven't put in the required time to feel grounded. And I'm not immune from it. You know, like, I've been practicing this stuff for decades, and I'm not immune to it myself. It's not like I'm a walking Buddha, you know, like, that's not the case. So, but I say, great, I'm glad that I get to invest a bit, like, great, okay, now I know. So if you haven't spent a whole lot of time on the internal world, understanding how thought 1 leads to thought 2, and how thought 1 and 2 together work with emotion 1 and 2, and understanding your internal experience, I think it becomes almost overwhelmingly or lucky that you show up into an environment and you're anywhere close to your best. And so it's a long way of me saying, go in. And how do you go in? You write, you meditate, you train your mind in the ways that we were talking about earlier, you know. I want to double click on confidence in a moment.
Okay.
And then you have conversations with people of wisdom. And so that your framework is clear, your skills are clear. And you can start here. You can say, okay, at a scale of 1 to 10, how calm am I in high stress, fast paced environments? How confident I'm 1 to 10. Do your own inventory. And then you can double click to build a plan to support that.
Yeah.
But if I were to ask you guys are great at what you do. This is going to sound like a setup. Confidence matters, right? And then so where does confidence come from?
Competence would be the one-word answer for me.
I would say experience.
This is where most people go. They say competence. And there's a psychological model around this, okay? And most people say experience or past success, something like that. Have you ever, like, experienced that, well, let me not put you guys in it. I've had plenty of opportunities to work with world's best where they've already won gold. They've done the thing at the highest level. They have high competence.
Yeah.
They have high success in their past. Their experiences are rich of winning. And they walk into the environment with low confidence. Have you ever been nervous?
I mean, yeah.
And have you ever doubted yourself and struggled with, like, man, I don't know if I can get this thing done. Like, that looks bigger than me.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Well,
He's like, no, like,
well, I feel like
what am I talking about? Yeah, like,
nah, I'm good.
yeah.
No, I feel like
That's perfect.
I feel like I usually fall back on, like, oh yeah, I've been in hard situations before. I'll figure it out. Like, I don't know the answer, but, like, I'm confident in my ability to figure it out because I feel like I always have.
Okay, so this is where it comes from.
Okay.
So you need a sense of competence. You need some success in your life. You need a bank of experiences. But confidence passes through just one filter, which is what you say to yourself. So it's self-talk. So what you say to yourself is the filter that it must pass through to make sense of, my internal skills matched up against this external challenge? Do I have it? Do I have what it takes to meet this external challenge? And so the way you speak to yourself, self-talk, is where confidence functionally comes from. Now, you can't make it up. You can't say, like, I can't say to myself right now, like, hey, you guys want to go in the back and kind of bang some balls? I'm going to smoke you guys. I can say it.
Yeah, but you don't believe it.
I don't believe it. But let's say I do believe it. Like, no, I'm a great athlete. Now I'm kind of delusional in that respect, right? And then all of a sudden, like, I see what you do. Now I'm exposed. Like, now I've got to get to the truth of something. Like, well, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So that's why it has to be credible. What I say must be credible.
Right. Yeah,
And that's what I was talking about earlier. Like, when you're going to drop your hips into a moment and it's real and there's something on the line for you, do you know how to speak to yourself? And that is why we practice. What are the right thoughts for you to have? And then practice those right thoughts. How do you practice them? Write them down. Make sure each one is credible, is believable. And then you practice those before you take off your shoes and get into the sand.
Yeah.
You practice them when you're in a last set, hard set. You practice them when you're in a hard conversation with a loved one. You practice them.
Yeah.
And then anything you practice becomes pretty familiar.
Right.
And so that's one way to think about training confidence. Write it down, make sure it's real, that you've got something to back it up, and then you practice those daily. And if I was your technical skill coach, we'd have a plan. We'd write some stuff down, wouldn't we? We'd say, okay, we're going to work on like cut shots, or we're going to work on like this, that, and the other. And then we'd score it in some kind of way. And we watch film, we do. So psychologically, you do the same thing. What do you work on? Write it down.
Yeah.
And then beginning of the day, end of the day, give yourself a score. And if you don't know how to do that yourself, you can talk to your partner, life partner or coach partner or volleyball partner, and say, okay, how'd we do today? And you're like, confidence, how'd you do? You don't have to play the game like you don't have it. You can just actually have real conversations about developing a psychological skill.
I love it.
So good.
Super concrete.
Yeah. Well, I know you have a time limit, and we're pushing an hour here, so I don't want to keep you too long.
No,
but thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
I know that you're a busy guy, and you have one of the best podcasts that I listen to
thank you.
all the time, and you have Compete to Create.
Yes.
Correct? And,
yeah.
So if there's anything, where can people find you? And if there's any way that we can spread the word?
So we took the best practices from solid science and our understanding of how this stuff works in high stress, high paced environments, and we put it to created an online course. And then so that is, for me, I believe that it's the most important piece of work that I've created to this point.
And this is the part that you partner with Pete Carroll on?
Yeah.
Compete to Create is the company?
It's the company.
Right. Okay.
And so, so that is an online course, and what's fantastic about that is we walk through all of those 5 pillars of the inner game that we talked about earlier. And then we've got Olympians or sports psychologists that will coach you in it. Oh. And so you probably know one of our coaches, Nicole Davis, 2-time Olympian, Courtney Thompson, Courtney, 2-time Olympian, 2-time medalist. Yep. And so Alicia Glass.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so actually she changed her, she's recently married. What's Elisa's last name?
I don't know.
Setter. Sorry, Alicia, I'm blanking on your married name right now. Yeah, and we got a handful of sports psychologists. So when you get into the course, you go in there and you wrestle with the concepts. They help hold you accountable. They're there to answer questions, to make it real for you. And you can find all of that on findingmastery.net is our website that's got ways to get to the podcast, ways to get to the course, and the social handles are on there as well. So.
And it's for people at any level?
Any level.
Olympians to the beginners and whatnot?
Yeah, the way we designed it was for, people that are serious, they want to get better.
Yeah.
And it was something that I needed and I didn't have when I was 15. So that was always in the back of my mind, it still is today, like, could my 15-year-old self understand this? And so we worked really hard to make it very simple. Nice. And not lose the wisdom. That's what we hoped, at least.
Yeah.
So love it.
Awesome. Yeah. Love it. Well, thank you for putting all those resources out into the world. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's been a pleasure.
You guys are great. Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you down at the beach, maybe walking out to go surf, or do you play?
No, I do not play. I play with my son. He's 13, so we're tossing some balls around.
Hopefully he enjoys the book.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
thank you for
sure.
What was the title of your book?
Volleyball for Milkshakes.
Volleyball for Milkshakes. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I love it. Thank you for that. I'm sure he's going to enjoy it.
For sure, and I hope to see you out in the water.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
For a surf.
Thank you.
Right on.
All right, shoots, guys.
Shoots.